Not at all. Just director of operations.
He had to check on things. But I don't know. That was an interesting character. That was an interestingly written set of decisions that I appreciated. Him with the music, not line readings so much as cue readings, like the way that his facial expressions were as he reacted to Sam Neill struggling and then kicking the guy in the balls, like.
And this is another movie where John Carpenter had the patience to show that orderly, walking away from his room for about 15 seconds while sort of limping.
Yeah.
Like, movies don't do that nowadays. He just, 15 seconds of, oh man, Sam Neill got me good. Oh man. Like, it's just, it's interesting. It's a rare 95-minute movie that does take its time. This is going to sound weird to say. It's always moving, right? There's always a sense of going somewhere, of traveling, of moving, but it never does so in a breakneck speed. It's an interesting film, and I wonder, it only made $9 million at the box office, which kind of blows my mind, but it's also not. If you think about it, Sam Neill had Jurassic Park, but I don't think Sam Neill wasn't an A-lister at the time because Jurassic Park was about the dinosaurs, was about the experience, not so much about the actors. So it didn't have an A-lister. Carpenter had some kind of decent hits, but it just seemed like an R-rated, high-profile, high-concept movie. Like, teenagers probably wouldn't have enjoyed this. And probably a lot of adults at the time didn't go see it because if you looked at what the horror films were in 94, they didn't have a good name. I mean, they were kind of dreck. So it had a lot of things keeping people from watching it, and that's why it's a cult classic, because people watched it years later and went, holy crap, this is good.
Yeah. So many creatures. Well,
creatures.
I'll bet that if a teenager went to see it, they'd have fun with it for the creatures, but the level of energy is not what they are used to.
Yeah, it's not.
But the creatures, man, the little demon, it wasn't just a face on the back of his head.
Oh, yeah, that was
Sutter
crazy.
Kane had like a whole demon growing out of the back of him with arms, and when she's kissing him, she's like really like caressing the front of this demon's face. You see his little arms reaching around, like the old lady. I love the old lady, and when she turns into a tentacle monster.
Oh, that was a miniature. Beautiful.
That was so cool. Yeah. And then, you see, I thought that originally on a first viewing, I'd think that when they reference the tentacled creature in the greenhouse, that's the old lady. But in this case, I'm not sure if it's the old lady further transformed, or if it's just another creature. It's probably just another creature that lives in the greenhouse. And then just the painting.
Yeah. The
painting and the in lobby was so cool just by itself as a non-creature creature. And when Vigo the Carpathian, I don't remember his character's name, but it's inconsequential. But when our shaggy-haired, clearly Eastern European guy blows his head off, which they don't even show us, but he blows his head off, like, that's a scene that gives gravity to Trent's realization that all of this isn't as fake as he thought. And that's so funny. They kept thinking this was like a small talent of actors that were hired because originally it was so barren. He thinks that they're putting on this huge charade for the multi-millions or tens of millions of dollars of insurance money they would collect for a disappeared Sutter Kane. There's so much going on, and yet again, I say broken record. It's so easy to follow.
Yeah. You never lose track of it. It's never dishonest. There's no, and even though there's a bit of an unreliable narrator, you still get it. And I'll also, before we get back into it, what do you think was on Sutter Kane's back? That demon. What do you think that was? What did you read that as?
So just by coincidence of other movies I've seen, even though the movie I'm about to reference has nothing to do with this visual, I thought of The Dark Half, which is also an Evil Writer movie.
93.
Was that Timothy Hutton?
Yeah, Timothy Hutton, Stephen King. Yeah.
I thought of that. And so then I'm starting to think that maybe Sutter Kane was not always an evil, fantastic entity. Maybe he slowly transformed himself into one, and as people started to believe in the world that he was writing, it created power and an apotheosis, and we are literally seeing the demonification of him, the apotheosis of him. But instead of him becoming a thing, it is him splitting. We're seeing the fracture, the literal fracture of his humanity, albeit turning evil anyway. This pure entropic creature from the void.
I see it.
That's my take on it.
No, yeah. The dark half.
It's his dark half. It's his Timothy Hutton half.
It's beautiful girls.
Of course, in that movie, I think it was just a split personality, but much less menacing. But yeah, that was so cool. I think that might have been a play because the first time I ever saw anything like that, and I've seen it in several movies actually now. Demons did something like that, and so did Phantasm 2, where kind of a creature emerges from someone's back, but not like bursting out of them, but like it was always inside of them. And like, when it comes up, there's a cavity from which it emerged, like that fits it.
Yeah.
So there was some weird stuff in those movies. I really like that visual though. It's a really cool visual. They even did that in one of the American Horror Stories when it was just the kind of that wizardly like circus runner played by Shane West, not Shane West, something like that. The kid from American Beauty.
Okay, yeah.
Where on the back of his head he had a little face. And they said that if you got close to it, you could hear it whisper. I think that these concepts actually go back to Japanese mythology. Some of the Oni demons, that's a redundant term, but some of the Oni, which are demons, had things like that. A face literally on the back of their head.
Hey. They're
I don't know if
for
that's
everything.
as far back as it goes. I just know that from like Dungeons and Dragons because it uses a lot of mythology.
Nice.
There's so many neat things in this movie. So many neat things. And again, that door that almost burst, that door almost seemed biological.
Yep, your gooey door. And what about the door that Sam Neill gets thrown through?
He gets thrown through a door.
That's my.
And then there's the dimensional door that they tear through like paper.
And I mean, I just love when the confessional scene when he tells Sutter that his books suck. He's such a sassy guy, man. It just makes me so happy. It wasn't here before I wrote it.
He's a great spaz.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then the one punch KO that he lands on Linda. He hated doing that scene.
He flaps her many times. I feel like released today, that movie, they wouldn't make the movie that way.
So Sam Neill hated filming that. That's the one thing that Carpenter said he hated doing. Because he's like, if you watch it, he never even comes close to popping her. Because he hated doing it so much.
Sure. But I'll bet that he also hated getting a shard of glass in his neck when in the mental asylum cell scene.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great behind the scenes stories on these. And what's interesting too is he ended up getting Cronenberg's production designers for this movie because they're Canadian. So it's pretty cool that he teamed up with his crew, and he called it a fantasy horror film. And I agree, it's a fantasy horror film filled with some neat visuals. It's a lot of fun. It respects the audience, but it never tries to take you for a ride. I'm glad we talked about it, man.
I love this movie. I haven't encountered people that I can recall saying that this isn't good, but at the same time, I don't feel like I hear enough people say that it is.
Because I guess it's just not as accessible as people would like, but it's just so good. I mean, I'm glad
that might be true. I don't think I ever watched this on a streaming platform.
Yeah, IMDb has it 7.2, Rotten Tomatoes 58%. That doesn't make sense to me. I much more agree with IMDb on this. And I think that's where people are at. But when it came out, it only made $8 million in the United States. So let's add inflation, right? At $20 million most. That's not a big hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it probably didn't move on VHS. And then when Scream hit, it probably became quite redundant. And so it's probably had a slow, cult following of people who love it that has grown. But it's still not as accessible as... It's still not as out there as The Thing, right? It doesn't have the Halloween vibe. So I think it's struggled because it's so successful at what it does. And that's just a fantasy horror film that's really smart. But it doesn't offer raw routine special effects, that kind of stuff.
It's so satisfying. Watching Sam Neill laugh in the movie theater at the end, I don't know. That was very satisfying for me.
No, it's beautiful. And, I think maybe if Nick Cage starred in this movie, this would be much more popular. But I like Sam Neill much more. But because of that, since he's not, he's been in gigantic films, but you don't hear many people going, I'm going to go hunt down that Sam Neill picture from 94.
I think you got to be a real movie buff just to know Sam Neill by name.
Yeah, exactly.
Either that or like Jurassic Park is your favorite movie. So either Jurassic Park is one of your favorite movies or you're a tremendous movie buff. Otherwise, yeah, I think that his name's going to escape most people, even if they grew up with his movies.
Because I think Jurassic Park, I know when people think about Jurassic Park, they do love the characters. Malcolm, him, Laura Dern, hold on to your butts, like Newman. But it's at the end, it's a dinosaur picture. It's a Spielberg picture. It's not Nick Cage in Con Air. It's not Sam Neill in Jurassic Park. But he was in Hunt for the Wilder People. I love that. And a lot of people are probably mad to say, he was in this, this, and this. But I think one of the things is just it's a successful movie. It's not like there's no gratuity in it. It doesn't feature a lot of monsters, but still a lot of fun. It's smart. It's well made. The tone is good. And I think it's just, I think it has enough of an audience to warrant this Blu-ray release. It's just not, it needs more love, John. Hopefully we can do that with this.
Well, yeah, hopefully we'll get some people out there to buy it. I was telling my lab mate, Michael, about our covering this movie, and I was telling him how it was the third of this Apocalypse trilogy. I explained what the Apocalypse trilogy is, and he's like, you know what, John, you've lent me like 12 movies that I haven't even watched yet. He has two very small children, so he doesn't get to watch movies much. He's like, but God, and he hasn't been borrowing any new movies. When I say, like, do you want to borrow this? He's like, no, I got like a stack of them. I got to get to some of these first. He said, you know what, John, like, give me that one. Let me throw that in the stack. Let me throw that in the stack and see if I can get to that when I told him about this one. So, just by me talking about it and how excited I was to record this episode, he wanted to watch it.
Watch it.
So
do it.
So we got at least one, Mark. We've already gotten at least one with our enthusiasts.
So if you're listening to this, send us a message. And if you watch it for the first time, let us know what you think about it. We want to know that we influence people to watch this picture. So please do that. But John, thank you for joining me. This was fun.
This is a blast. Any excuse to watch John Carpenter films. You don't have to twist my arm very hard. And definitely don't twist a dog's arm too hard, because we see what happens when that happens in a movie.
Like that poor dog. Medieval times.
I'm telling you, that dog got Ren-fared.
Turkey leg. Oh, that girl ate his leg. Its leg.
Recently.
Ugh.
Like, she might have dropped it right before the camera hit her.
Oof.
It might have been in her hand out of frame.
Oh, man. She might have killed one of the townspeople with it.
She might have just bludgeoned them to death.
She kills Vigo with it.
With their own dog's leg.
Poor Vigo just gets beaten with it.
That dog just hopping around.
Well, thank you for joining me, John. This was great.
All right.
So for me, Mark Hoffmeyer, for John Levengood, this is Movies, Films, and Flicks. We'll see you next week.